Hey Amy, how you doing today?
Hi, Eric. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. So, to folks that are tuning in on a Tuesday who are watching us, why don't we introduce ourselves and tell everyone a little bit about what we do when we're not lawyering, maybe our writing stuff. So, I am Eric Meyer, the publisher of the Employer Handbook blog, and Amy, tell them a little bit about you and your blog.
I am Amy Epstein Gluck. My blog is affiliated with our firm, Fisher Broyles. It's the employment law blog that I co-author with Richard Cohen.
Cool. And anyone who came here not expecting to see this, what are you doing, nerds? and when we're not blogging, both of us are employment law partners at Fisher Broyles.
Yes, yes,
Amy's
yes.
actually our employment law counsel, in addition to being an employment lawyer. She wears two hats.
Three with
We're going to call upon all of our employment law wisdom today as we talk about a topic that is on probably most HR minds right now, and that is COVID and Thanksgiving and travel and employees getting together. And what do we do about all this? That's a lot to
yes.
unpack.
It's a hot topic.
It is. It is. And I don't know, my anecdotal initial sense from talking about it with people is folks are kind of afraid to touch it or go after it head on because part of it could mean implementing some pretty harsh rules for employees that impacts one of the biggest travel days of the year traditionally, and one of the times of the year where we get together with family and friends. And, to be
Yes,
honest, we don't want
yes. It's a very emotional topic for so many employees and their families and employers. So there's a lot of competing considerations here, with wanting to keep our workplaces safe and understanding that employees naturally want to see their families.
Yeah, what are some of the conversations you've been having, Amy, over the past couple of days, either with clients or colleagues?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Eric. Some of my clients are really, really struggling with their employees and the employees' desire for connection, really, and getting together and potentially not wearing masks in the workplace and congregating, when they shouldn't be, and really having trouble following the employer's safety guidelines and policies. I know a lot of our clients are worried about, their employees traveling this week and how they're going to bring them back to work next week if they can't telecommute. I know that you and I half the time are on the phone over the weekend with these issues. So yeah, I would say this is on everybody's mind. And while we might have expected travel to be lighter this year, we saw in the news today that it was pretty heavy today. What was it? 2 million people went through TSA.
Is that what it was? I saw some pictures from the airport over the past couple of days, and it didn't exactly mesh with the guidance that we're giving our clients of no one should be traveling if they can avoid it at all. Small
Right.
Thanksgivings, things like that. I mean, we could park that just for a second. We have states like, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for example, where I practice, among other states, or among other states, although Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth, where there are travel restrictions on individuals. So if you go out of state other than your normal business commute, or you're not doing it as part of work, but you travel to a friend's house in New Jersey, technically
Right.
you're supposed to quarantine when you come back for 14 days unless you can get a COVID test within 72 hours of your return that says you're negative.
Yeah. Yes, that's going to be a really big issue for employers, especially in states like yours, where there are now state quarantine orders mandating that if you go to a state where the positivity rate is over a certain percent, you're going to have to quarantine. That really puts the employee under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act structure, and they have to figure out if the employee, has paid leave, if they don't, if they've already used their paid sick leave, their emergency paid sick leave or not. These are all issues that employers are going to have to start to grapple with next week. Pennsylvania, employers especially.
So let's talk about one of those situations that you just scratched the surface on, and that's the FFCRA element, right?
Yeah.
Up to 14 days of paid sick leave available, and then an additional 10 weeks on top of that if you have to take care of a child who's home from school or home from daycare because it's closed due to COVID-19 reasons. But we'll park that for a second. We're not really focused on that so much right now. If you are subject to a quarantine order, clearly you can take up to 14 days of the first Coronavirus Response Act leave, assuming you're working for an employer that has fewer than 500 employees.
And assuming you haven't taken that
exactly right
leave yet. I mean, it is November 23rd. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act became effective on April 1. There's 5 more weeks left of it. A lot of employees have already used up that leave.
So what do we do in those situations, right? Let's assume we want to operate a functioning workplace, right? We're realists. We understand that we want to be safe. We understand that if we're in a place like Pennsylvania or other states that have these travel restrictions, that have quarantine orders in place when you return to the state if you travel out of state, there's going to be a lot of this travel going on for Thanksgiving. The business needs to run from the end of November through December. And we have employees who have already used up their Families First Coronavirus Response Act leave, but they want to see a relative in a neighboring state. What are we going to do in that situation?
That's a real worrying concern. And, it falls under the heading of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And we talk about that a lot. The bottom line is that if somebody comes back and they have to quarantine due to an order, then they have to. And if they can't telecommute and they don't have any paid sick leave, then they're left with any other accrued unused leave that they might have under one of the employer's, vacation policies or sick leave policies. A lot of states have paid sick leave requirements. But for, say a restaurant or a retail establishment where working from home is not really a viable option, it's really a Hobson's choice there. Not a Hobson's choice, Murphy's choice there. What are you going to do? Are you going to bring them back and risk all of your other employees due to the exposure that this one employee had from traveling, or are you going to not be able to run your business as effectively as you're used to? It's a hard decision to make and a hard decision to grapple with. So we're telling employers that you can restrict travel. You can restrict travel to certain states. We would encourage employers, of course, to be uniform and consistent in their application of that. But that is one option, to restrict travel so that you'll still be able to operate in the following week.
Yeah, but obviously not a very popular choice.
No.
I wrote about this on my blog last week and posted something about it on LinkedIn, and there weren't many people who were saying, oh yeah, we're going to restrict employee travel.
Right.
We're going to tell people where they can and can't go for Thanksgiving, because you have, like you said, Amy, you have what's legal versus kind of the practical effect of imposing one of those restrictions, and you may have a mutiny on your hands.
Agreed.
Or you may have a petri dish on your hands if everyone comes back to work and we have a big spike in COVID-19. Hopefully that's not the case.
Right. Exactly. So Speaking of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, this is what happened when children are not in school. I'm on a live recording.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
These things happen. It's all good.
Yes, I have 3 teenagers at home. 2 teenagers and 1 young adult.
So Amy, I saw, I think I saw it in Law 360, and if I didn't see it in Law 360, they get a free plug. But I actually saw a lawsuit get filed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where I believe the underlying facts were employee is forced to quarantine for 14 days pursuant to some state order such as the one we have right now. You go out of state, you come back, stay at home for 14 days.
Right.
Employee gets fired. An employee then turns around and sues, alleging wrongful discharge for violating a public policy exception to the at-will employment doctrine. So this isn't an FFCRA situation, no retaliation. I'm assuming this person didn't have any FFCRA leave available. And if I'm botching the facts a little bit, let's just work with it. But it's an interesting theory.
It is. I don't know that that employer has much of a case, though, when you consider that there was a state quarantine order.
Right. But of course, if you're the employer, you say to your employees, look, we don't care. We're not telling you what you can and can't do in your own time, but you have a certain amount of leave that you're allowed to use.
Right.
You have a certain amount of leave in your bank, whether it's paid time off, whether it's vacation, whether it's FFCRA.
Right.
Be guided accordingly, as the employer would say, right?
Yes.
You use up too much of that and you don't have any left. Does the employer have to give this person an extra 2 weeks, let's say, unpaid time off to allow them to quarantine?
I would say you're going to have to pause it. What is wrong with the bottom line? So, Eric, I'm glad you raised it too.
You know?
Yes. What happens when your office is where your children are? But no, you raise a really interesting conundrum, and I think that a lot of employers are really grappling with this. You know, we're seeing what is it up to now? $3 million in FFCRA violations, I think was the latest number.
Wow.
It is a tough call. You know, you also have states with lawful conduct statutes.
Right.
It's certainly lawful conduct to travel in most instances. You know, it may not be in all instances depending on the state, right? If the state's saying you can't travel out of state without coming back and quarantining or something similar. But these are fraught issues, and it's a state by state consideration. You're looking at your home state where your business is, as well as the state that the employee travels to potentially.
So given that backdrop, where with that caveat that a lot of this is state by state. So what restrictions may be in place in Pennsylvania are certainly not the same restrictions that are in place in North Dakota, where there actually are off-duty conduct laws, where they're not the same restrictions that are in place in Florida, for example, or whatever. But let's see if we can come up with some universal guardrails and tips that we can provide to employers, subject to, we're not providing legal advice. Go talk to your outside employment law counsel.
They're hypothetical guidelines.
Hypothetical best practices.
Good idea.
One of them, I would think, and if you haven't done it already, do it really soon after you see this video, is get a memo out to your employees, communicate with them about safety measures they should consider over the next couple of days, right?
Yes, I think that communication piece is so critical. We've both written about this, I believe. Transparency right now and good frequent communication, setting expectations, having it in writing, being clear, being a human, I think is going to go a long way, especially if you do decide to impose any kind of, more draconian measure, like telling people what they can and can't do with the Thanksgiving holiday. But that communication piece, not just telling them, but reminding them of your safety guidelines and protocol, which of course you have, then that should really apply to travel too. And how, you're going to keep yourself safe while you're traveling.
What about the idea? I don't know that this is a best practice or just a bad practice. I don't know. What about the idea of taking a survey of employees in advance of Thanksgiving to get a sense of what their travel plans may be, so that as the employer, you can schedule your workforce accordingly, let's say on Black Friday or the following week,
Sure.
Thanksgiving, to avoid and mitigate the risk of transmission of COVID-19 in the workplace.
I think that's a good idea, Eric. Assuming that it's mandatory and that, everybody has to respond to it. Because if then you can work around it. I think that what's going to be really key with a risk mitigation strategy is being uniform and consistent in your application to get all of your employees involved. So you have accurate data too.
Yeah, how about the dichotomy though between what employees are asked to do and then what managers and supervisors do and executives do, which isn't necessarily consistent with what the message is to everyone else? I could see
Sure.
having a big problem in the workplace, morale-wise.
Yes, I would definitely agree with you. It's so often that middle step sometimes that loses ground. Everybody has to really be on the same page. And I think, like so many things that we talk about in so many different aspects of employment law, any type of plan has to really start from the top. You can't have your C-suite, deciding that whatever laws apply to your employees won't apply to the C-suite or to, your senior VPs or something like that. It's really got to be a top-down kind of structure where people know that you're not just talking the talk, but you're walking the walk as well.
So speaking of talking the talk and walking the walk, I guess we should tell people what we're doing for Thanksgiving, right? I mean,
Yes, yes. What are you doing, Eric? Are you cooking?
me personally.
Yes.
No, I ordered dessert. I'll definitely be called upon to do some dishes. That's generally my role around Thanksgiving. I know to step out of the way when other people are working the magic beforehand in the kitchen. Although some of my children, so my oldest is 11 all the way down to 6. I have 4. I think they think they're going to prepare some side dishes, so I may be in charge of supervising some of that.
Nice. Now, do you usually travel? Do you usually travel for Thanksgiving?
Every other year we travel. So one year we'll host, and then the next year we'll go up to my in-laws. We stay within New Jersey. I'm in southern portion of New Jersey. They're in the north. And this year we're hosting just us, and my in-laws, just the two of them are probably going to come. I mean, 2 weeks ago they were definitely going to come, but now with everything that's going on,
Right.
touch and go, and we'll figure it out between now and Thursday. What about you?
We are here. Usually I fly down to South Florida, where I grew up and where I've gone for Thanksgiving my whole life. And my brother's family flies in from California. So, I empathize really strongly with employees in this dilemma, having this dilemma. You want to be with your family, and Thanksgiving is the one time of year I'm guaranteed to see my brother and his family and my parents all together. I think that and really tying it together. So we're gonna just be the 5 of us here with probably my parents on Zoom, and we will Zoom as well with my brother's family in California. But I think that employers, to your point earlier, want to be really mindful of the family aspect of the holiday and what the employees who aren't traveling, kind of what they're going through, what they may be feeling, and how they may be missing their family. So I think these next 5 weeks are just going to be a lot. a lot. And, you know, while you do the dishes really well, my kids are doing my dishes. Kids
Yeah,
are doing the dishes, husband's making the turkey. I'm going to attempt to recreate my mother stuffing. Uh,
fantastic.
I know. We'll see. We'll see. And if all else fails, there's always Whole Foods.
There's always what?
Whole Foods.
Oh yeah. But you know, this year, my wife told me that Whole Foods discontinued their sweet mashed with marshmallows on top that I love.
Well, I'm making that. I'm going to make that. I've got that. I'm making two things, the sweet potatoes and the stuffing.
That's my jam right there.
I know, I know. So, but we'll be here. Normally, I take the entire week of Thanksgiving off, and I know you are usually with family the week of Thanksgiving. So I would say that if anyone watching has any questions about any of these travel issues, the communication piece especially, your safety plans, we are here for you.
Yeah, we'll post this. You're watching this on YouTube. Look down in the description below and you'll see contact information for both Amy and for me. And we're constantly available to provide, well, non-legal advice. And I don't want to get promotional on this. I suspect, though, that you and I will be back talking. You alluded to something earlier, 5 weeks between now and the end of the year.
Yes,
Gosh, is FFCRA going to be renewed? We've got
right.
a lot of stuff going on in the schools right now. I mean, all the schools around me, although not my kids' school yet, are going remote. So
Sure.
that's going to impact FFCRA leave, and
Right.
we'll touch upon that later on. But for now, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you to you as well, and to your family, and to everybody else's family.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll be back soon. Enjoy.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.